Beatrix Miller grew up in a small house on the outskirts of a quiet little town where life passed by without many upheavals. From a young age, she stood out among her peers for her determination and curiosity, her eyes always shining whenever she learned something new. Her dream was big as the challenges she faced daily to become a lawyer. Her mother, a hard-working woman who held 2 jobs to support the family, always proudly said, "Beatrix, you will go far, my daughter. You have a brilliant mind and a heart that never gives up." Inspired by these words, Beatrix spent sleepless nights studying under the dim light of a lamp in her modest room, surrounded by borrowed books and meticulous notes. The journey of studying was not easy, resources were scarce, and each textbook seemed like an unattainable luxury. But Beatrix found refuge in the public library, a place where she could feed her voracious appetite for knowledge. There, she devoured law books and watched online lectures, absorbing every piece of information as if it were a treasure. Beatrix's efforts were recognized one day when, after an exhausting selection process, she received the news that would change her life. The white envelope with the university's logo arrived by mail on a Thursday afternoon. Trembling, she opened the letter in the kitchen with her mother by her side. "Dear Miss Miller," the letter began, "it is with great pleasure that we offer you a full scholarship to study law at our institution." Tears of joy and relief streamed down Beatrix's face as she read and reread the letter. Hugging her mother, she whispered emotionally, "We did it, Mom. I'm going to be a lawyer." It was the beginning of a new chapter, a promise of a future that Beatrix was determined to build with her own hands. Beatrix woke up before dawn, already dressed to face her long day. After a quick meal, she grabbed her heavy backpack full of books and notes and headed to the university. The morning classes were intense, filled with legal debates and complex case studies that she absorbed with fervor. "This material will be on the bar exam. You need to master this," insisted the professor, pointing to the board full of notes and references. At the end of classes, while her classmates dispersed for group lunches and leisure moments, Beatrix hurried to the local restaurant, where she worked as a waitress. With her uniform already in hand, she quickly transformed in the back bathroom, swapping her academic clothes for a white shirt and apron. "Table 5 is calling you," shouted the manager as soon as she stepped into the dining area. Amidst the hustle and bustle of serving trays and constant orders, Beatrix found time to mentally review the laws and theories discussed earlier. Every free moment was an opportunity to study. "You never stop, do you?" commented a co-worker, seeing her flipping through her notes while waiting for coffee at table 9. "I can't stop. Every minute is precious," she replied, smiling despite the evident fatigue in her eyes. At the end of the shift, exhausted but satisfied for having conquered another day, Beatrix returned home. The night still held hours of study for her. Sitting at the kitchen table under the dim light of the lamp, she delved back into the books, surrounded by papers and cups of strong coffee that helped her strong. "This will all be worth it," she murmured to herself, reviewing every detail of criminal and civil law, keeping the flame of her dream of becoming a great lawyer alive. In the beginning of her 3rd year, Beatrix's routine at law school took an unexpected turn with the arrival of a new student, Edward Wallace, who transferred from a prestigious university on the East Coast. He brought with him an air of sophistication and an unpretentious charm that quickly caught the attention of their classmates. During a constitutional law class, the professor asked them to form pairs for a project, and fate made Edward choose Beatrix. "Can I join you?" he asked with a friendly smile, extending his hand to greet her. "Sure, it will be a pleasure to work with you," Beatrix responded, a bit surprised and intrigued by his interest. As they worked together, their conversations flowed naturally, blending academic discussions with personal touches. Edward shared stories of his life in New York and his fascination with jazz, while Beatrix talked about her aspirations in life in the small town. "You really inspire me, you know. Your dedication is something rare to see," confessed Edward one of those afternoons in the library. Over time, mutual admiration evolved into a solid friendship. They began spending more time together outside of university, exploring local coffee shops and attending live music events. One night, while walking back home after a jazz concert, Edward stopped and looked at Beatrix under the moonlight. "Being with you has been the highlight of my days. I think I'm falling in love with you," he said, hesitant but sincere. Beatrix felt her heart race, surprised and touched by his words. "Edward, I feel something special too." "I'm glad you feel the same," she replied, her eyes meeting his. It was at that moment they shared their first kiss, sealing the beginning of a romance that seemed destined. From that day on, they became inseparable, finding in love a safe haven against the pressures and challenges of academic life. As Beatrix and Edward's relationship deepened, they shared not only moments of joy but also the worries that began to arise over time. One afternoon, while walking through the town, Edward decided to open his heart about something that was bothering him. "Beatrix, there's something I need to tell you about my family. They are, well, quite traditional and very concerned with appearances and status," Edward began, choosing his words carefully. "I fear they may not accept our relationship easily because of our different backgrounds." Beatrix felt a pang of insecurity, but kept her expression calm, holding his hand more firmly. "Edward, I understand this might be difficult for them, But what really matters is what we feel for each other, right? She responded, trying to bring some comfort to the conversation. Edward smiled, touched by her strength and understanding. Yes, you're right. It's just that I don't want you to feel hurt or rejected in any way. I love you, Beatrix. And that's what matters most to me. We'll face this together. Okay, he said with a hopeful expression. Of course, Edward, I love you too. And nothing will change that. We'll face any challenge together. Our bond is strong. And I believe in us, Beatrix affirmed with a conviction that reinforced hope in both of them. They continued their walk hand in hand, allowing themselves to dream of a future together. They shared plans and laughed, letting the sunset's warm embrace surround them. These special moments strengthened their bond, creating a safe haven against the adversities they knew they might face. They were determined to overcome any barrier, keeping faith in the love they had for each other. On a rainy afternoon, Edward decided to share more about his family background with Beatrix while they cozied up on the couch in his small apartment. Surrounded by books and mugs of hot tea, he took a deep breath, preparing to delve into the complexities of his family heritage. My mother, Mary, she comes from humble beginnings just like us, Edward began, looking out the window and watching the raindrops trickle down. But after she married my father, Vincent, who was a very successful businessman, things changed. He introduced her to a world of wealth and privilege, something she had never imagined. Beatrix listened attentively, holding Edward's hand to encourage him to continue. When my father passed away, he left his fortune to me, and my mother received a generous pension due to their separation, which happened a few years before his death. Over time, this new reality made her change. She became quite arrogant and forgot where she came from. Now she has this fixed idea that I must marry someone of equivalent status and influence, Edward explained, with a mixture of sadness and frustration in his voice. Beatrix squeezed his hand, offering comfort. It's tough, Edward, but your mother is a product of her circumstances like many of us. Maybe she just wants to protect you in her own way. Even if it seems unfair to us, Edward nodded, acknowledging Beatrix's understanding. Yes, I know. It's just that I want her to see how wonderful you are, Beatrix, not for your bank account, but for who you truly are. You are the most amazing person I've ever met. And that should be enough, Beatrix smiled, moved by Edward's sincerity. We'll show her who I am and who we are together. Maybe over time she can see what really matters. Edward then decided to address another complicated aspect of his family, something Beatrix needed to fully understand. He adjusted himself on the couch, looking into Beatrix's eyes with seriousness. There's one more thing you should know about my family's dynamics, he said. My sister, Susan, Edward continued, pausing for a moment to choose the right words. She is only my mother's daughter from a relationship before her marriage to my father, Vincent. Despite not being her biological father, he raised her as his own daughter. Beatrix nodded, absorbing the information and encouraging him to continue. Edward took a deep breath before proceeding. Susan has always had a comfortable lifestyle thanks to the pension my mother receives. She shares many of Mary's views, especially when it comes to social status and marriages. Edward hesitated, the discomfort visible in his expression. Susan often advises me to choose partners who match our family status. She insists that I should marry someone from our own social class, someone who can contribute to the family status, so to speak. Beatrix held Edward's hand, expressing her support. And how do you feel about that, she asked. Edward looked at Beatrix, his gaze laden with emotion. I don't agree with her, Beatrix. For me, what really matters is the character and kindness of the person, not their bank balance or last name. It's hard because there's constant pressure, but I'm with you because I love who you are, not what you have. Beatrix smiled, touched by Edward's sincerity. And I'm with you for the same reason, Edward. We'll face this pressure together. Your heart is what matters to me, not what your family thinks. Edward nodded, grateful for Beatrix's understanding and support. Thank you, Beatrix. That means a lot to me. Edward's decision to open up about his relationship with Beatrix to his family came with a mix of anxiety and hope. One night, after a family dinner in the grand dining room of the mansion, Edward decided it was the moment to reveal his relationship with Beatrix. With the table still adorned with the remnants of the meal, Edward cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Mother Susan, there is something important I would like to share with you. I'm dating someone, he began, trying to keep his voice steady. Mary, always attentive to details, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. And who is the young woman, Edward? From which family does she come, she asked, her tone insinuating her expectations. Edward took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could trigger a variety of reactions. Her name is Beatrix Miller. She is a law student like me, and she works as a waitress to pay for her studies. She has a scholarship and comes from a humble family. The silence that followed was palpable. Mary frowned, clearly displeased with the news, while Susan observed the scene, her expression unreadable. A waitress? Edward, you cannot be serious. This is completely inappropriate for someone of our stature. Mary finally spoke, her voice laden with disdain. The ensuing discussion was tense, with Edward defending his love for Beatrix and her integrity as a person. "Mother, what matters is who she is inside, not the balance in her bank account or her social background," Edward argued passionately. Mary, seeing the determination on her son's face, sighed deeply. After long moments of debate, she finally conceded, at least superficially. "All right, Edward, if you say she is so special, I will try to accept your choice," said Mary, though her voice and cold gaze suggested that her true acceptance might be far different from her words. Edward, relieved but cautious of his mother's reluctance, thanked her. "Thank you, Mother. That means a lot to me," he said, hopeful but aware that the journey ahead could still hold significant challenges. Despite her conciliatory words, that night Mary had no sincere intentions of accepting Beatrix as part of the family. In the following days, during a series of discreet meetings in her luxurious living room, Mary began to weave a Machiavellian plan along with her friend Claire, an elegant and cunning woman. They carefully planned how to separate Edward from Beatrix. "Claire, we need to be subtle but decisive. Edward must not suspect our intentions," Mary instructed as she served tea for both of them, her jewelry sparkling in the chandelier light. Claire, with a smile that barely concealed her ambition, agreed. "I understand, Mary, and I already have the perfect person in mind to help us." A few days later, a young actor named Dean was hired for the most crucial role of his career. Mary met him in a secluded cafe, passing him a photograph of Beatrix and details of her routine. "Your job is simple," Mary explained, sliding an envelope of money to him. "Get close to her, gain her trust, and make everything look as convincing as possible." Dean, although reluctant, accepted the job, motivated by the generous amount offered. He began to frequent the same places as Beatrix, casually bumping into her at the library, the restaurant where she worked, and even in the university corridors. One sunny afternoon, while Beatrix was studying in the park, Dean approached her with a charming smile. "Hi, sorry to bother you, but is that book about criminal law?" "I'm thinking of taking that course next semester," he began, initiating a casual conversation. Beatrix, always kind and helpful, saw no harm in assisting. "Yes, it's one of the best in the field. I can lend you some notes if you want," she replied, unaware of Dean's true intentions. Weeks passed, and Dean skillfully inserted himself into Beatrix's life. The plot was in full swing, with Mary and Claire monitoring every step, waiting for the right moment to strike the blow that would separate Beatrix and Edward forever. Mary, with her calculating mind, carefully observed the situation unfold according to her meticulous plan. She had hired a professional photographer, specialized in capturing moments without being noticed, to follow Dean and Beatrix. After a few weeks, the moment Mary had eagerly awaited finally arrived. On a warm afternoon, as Beatrix and Dean chatted animatedly on a park bench, Dean, following the precise instructions he had received, took advantage of the relaxed setting to stage an intimate moment. Laughing at something Beatrix had said, he leaned forward and, in a calculated manner, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek while pretending to stumble, making the gesture appear more accidental. The photographer, hidden among the foliage, captured the exact moment, the image showing what could be interpreted as a more intimate kiss. With the photographs in hand, Mary prepared a convincing dossier. She included several photos, each carefully selected to tell the story she wanted Edward to believe, along with a letter where she expressed her concern and disappointment upon discovering that Beatrix might not be the right woman for him. "Dear Edward," the letter began, "it is with a heavy heart that I must show you something disturbing. I have always wanted the best for you and could never forgive myself if I did not share this. Even if it hurts." When Edward received the package, his disappointment was palpable. The images struck him like a blow, clouding his judgment with a mix of sadness and anger. He trusted his mother and never imagined she had manipulated the situation. Feeling betrayed and confused, Edward confronted Beatrix, the photos spread out in front of him, each one telling a story that Mary had skillfully orchestrated to destroy their relationship. The atmosphere became tense as Edward, with the photographs in hand, confronted Beatrix in her small apartment. Each of the images was a silent accusation. Edward's gaze was a mixture of pain and distrust, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the photos. "Beatrix, what is this?" Edward asked, his voice breaking with emotion. "How could you do this to me? I thought we loved each other." Beatrix, taking the photos, felt her heart sink as she saw the manipulated images. Tears began to form in her eyes as she tried to gather the strength to explain the situation. "Edward, this isn't what it looks like. I would never betray you. This man, Dean, he approached me as a friend from college. The kiss, it was a moment he forced. I didn't expect it. It was a stolen kiss. I think this is a setup." Edward, shaken and confused, ran his hands through his hair, struggling to digest Beatrix's words. "A setup? Beatrix, why would anyone do this? Are you saying my mother? No, that doesn't make sense. She just showed me what you did, Edward. Please, you need to believe me. I love you and would never do anything to hurt you," Beatrix pleaded, her hands extended in supplication. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. Edward, though he loved Beatrix, was blinded by the impact of the images and his mother's influence. "I don't know what to think. I should have listened to my mother about being careful, he said, his voice laden with resentment. I can't do this, Beatrice, not after this. With those words, Edward left the apartment, leaving behind a devastated and lonely Beatrice, who cried among the shadows of the room that once shared moments of happiness. Under the weight of misunderstandings and manipulations, he ended the relationship, unable to see through the web of lies woven around him. In her final year of law school, Beatrice faced her greatest challenges, but none compared to the discovery that would change her life forever. Sitting in the small bathroom of her apartment, she held a positive pregnancy test, her heart racing as a mix of fear and joy flooded her. "I'm pregnant," she whispered to herself, feeling the profound implications of those words. After a few days of absorbing the news, Beatrice knew she needed to reassess her situation. Her study load was already intense, and her part-time jobs barely covered her current expenses. With a child on the way, financial and time demands would multiply. Sitting at her small dining table covered in books and notes, she made one of the toughest decisions of her life. Talking with her mother over the phone, Beatrice expressed her concerns. "Mom, I don't know how I'm going to manage," she said, her voice trembling. Finishing law school while taking care of a baby and working seems impossible. Her mother, always her rock, responded with encouraging but realistic words. "Beatrice, you are the strongest person I know, but sometimes we need to adjust our plans. Maybe taking a break from school is necessary so you can focus on taking care of yourself and the baby." With a heavy heart, Beatrice agreed. She met with the academic advisor at the law school to discuss her options. "I understand your situation, Beatrice, and I support your decision to pause your studies," said the advisor kindly. "The school will be here when you're ready to return." Then, with a mix of resignation and determination, Beatrice stepped away from law school, focusing on increasing her work hours. She began to look for more job opportunities that could accommodate her condition and eventually found a part-time administrative job that offered a bit more financial stability. Each day she prepared for her child's arrival, knowing that despite the imminent challenges, she was taking a necessary step to ensure a future for both of them. One day, armed with courage, Beatrice decided that Edward had the right to know about the baby, regardless of the past complications. On a cloudy autumn day, she drove to the imposing Wallace residence, her heart pounding as she parked the car in the long driveway. With hesitant steps, she approached the front door and rang the bell, holding her breath as she waited. The door opened, and it was not Edward who greeted her, but Mary, with an expression of surprise that quickly turned to disdain. "Beatrice, what are you doing here?" "Edward is not home," said Mary coldly, blocking the entrance. Beatrice, trying to stay calm, replied, "I need to talk to Edward." "It's very important." Her voice trembled slightly, but she struggled to maintain firmness. Mary laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Important? I doubt that very much. Tell me, what could be so urgent?" Gaining a bit more confidence, Beatrice took a deep breath before revealing the news. "I'm pregnant. Edward is the father." I think he should know. The change in Mary's expression was instant and icy. "Pregnant? This is absurd. If you think you can use this to worm your way back into our family, you are very mistaken." Mary shot back, her voice laced with threat. She continued, her words cutting the air like blades. "If you insist on this story, I will ensure that Edward fights for custody. He has the resources and the influence. Do you really think you can compete with that? You are poor, with no means to fight against us." Beatrice felt fear growing inside her, Mary's words sounding like a clear warning. The instinct to protect her future child became stronger than the need for confrontation. "No, I don't want to cause trouble. I'll raise the baby on my own," she murmured, stepping back. Mary gave a cold, calculated smile. "Wise decision. Keep this away from Edward and our family," she said, closing the door with a dull click that echoed in Beatrice's ears. Trembling, Beatrice returned to the car, tears beginning to flow freely as she drove back home. In that moment, she decided it was best for her child to grow up away from the shadows and threats of the Wallaces, even if it meant doing it alone. Months had passed since the confrontation at the Wallace house, and on a cool spring morning, Beatrice gave birth to a boy whom she decided to name Franklin, after her grandfather. The birth was difficult, but the moment she held Franklin in her arms for the first time was pure joy mixed with relief. He had Edward's curious eyes, something that brought both sweetness and pain to Beatrice's heart. Despite the difficulties, Beatrice was determined to provide the best life possible for her son. The nights were long, often interrupted by Franklin's needs, and the mornings began before the sun rose. At home, Beatrice created a special corner for Franklin, filled with children's books that she read to him every night. Dreaming of returning to college and finishing her law degree one day, "My love, Mommy will go back to college, I promise," she whispered to Franklin as he fell asleep in her arms. Although her love for Franklin filled her heart, moments of loneliness and financial difficulties weighed heavily on Beatrice. Often, while Franklin slept, she sat at the small kitchen table studying law materials from her college days, keeping her academic aspirations alive. One of those nights, while flipping through an old law book, Beatrice spoke to herself, a practice she had adopted to stay focused. No matter how hard it is, Franklin, I'm going to show you what it means to never give up. We'll do this together, just you and me, despite the adversities. Beatrice maintained a resilient spirit. She knew the journey would be arduous, but her love for Franklin propelled her forward, fueling the hope of a future where they could celebrate their achievements together. With Franklin growing quickly and expenses increasing, Beatrice knew she needed a job that offered more stability and a better salary. The memory of her law classes gave her an idea. Although she had not finished college, her legal knowledge was considerable, and she decided she could use this to her advantage. After a series of applications and some interviews, Beatrice was called for a secretary position at a small local law firm. During the interview, the senior lawyer was impressed with her familiarity with legal terms and procedures, despite her incomplete academic journey. "So you studied law?" the lawyer asked, examining her resume with interest. "Yes, I was in my final year when I had to stop for personal reasons," Beatrice replied, hesitant but honest. The lawyer nodded, understanding. "Well, your legal background will certainly be useful here. We all need to start somewhere, and your initiative to apply shows determination. Let's see how you do here." Relieved and grateful for the opportunity, Beatrice accepted the position with enthusiasm. Working at the law firm was a doorway back to the world she had been forced to leave. She quickly adapted to her responsibilities, managing schedules, filing documents, and even attending some consultations, which allowed her to further refine her legal understanding. At the firm, Beatrice found an environment where she could grow, and each workday reinforced her hope of one day resuming and completing her law education. She strove to balance work and caring for Franklin, organizing her routine to maximize time with her son. "Each day is another step for us, Franklin," she told her son every morning before leaving for work. "We are building our future stone by stone." This new phase brought a sense of stability and progress, and Beatrice felt increasingly capable of providing a better life for Franklin, while also nurturing her own aspirations. 4 years passed quickly, marked by challenges and small victories. Franklin was now a bright and cheerful 4-year-old boy whose presence lit up Beatrice's days. She continued in her role as a secretary at the law firm, where she had become an indispensable figure, admired both for her work ethic and her competence. Each day, after dropping Franklin off at preschool, Beatrice headed to work, always taking a moment to look at the small chalkboard in the kitchen where she wrote her goals. College was always at the top of the list, written in large, firm letters. During quiet moments at the office, she researched evening law programs, fueling the dream of returning to her studies. "You have been such a valuable part of our team," Beatrice, the senior lawyer, told her one day, watching her meticulously organize case files. "Have you ever thought about finishing your degree? I think you would make an excellent lawyer." With a smile, Beatrice replied, "It's my plan eventually. I want to set the best example for my son." Meanwhile, in a world far from Beatrice's daily life, Edward had taken over the leadership of his father's company. His marriage to Clara, a union more strategic than passionate, remained childless. Clara frequently expressed her aversion to motherhood. "I simply can't imagine sacrificing my body for a child," Clara confessed at a social gathering, holding Edward's arm. "It's just not part of my plans." Edward, though he respected her decision, couldn't help but feel a void. Sometimes he found himself thinking about Beatrice and what could have been if different circumstances had shaped their past. However, he remained committed to Clara, focusing on his duties as CEO and husband, even though a sense of incompleteness haunted him from time to time. The parallel lives, so different in circumstances and emotions, continued on their separate courses. With Beatrice nurturing hope and Edward facing the responsibilities of a family legacy, each carrying their own dreams and disillusions. On an apparently ordinary morning, Edward found himself facing a reality that would deeply shake the foundations of his life. During a routine checkup, alarmed by persistent fatigue and other worrying symptoms, the doctor gave him devastating news: a diagnosis of advanced stage cancer. The silence that followed the announcement was heavy, laden with disbelief and fear. "We are here to support you every step of the way, Edward. We will explore all available treatment options," assured the doctor, trying to instill some hope amidst the shock. Edward, still trying to grasp the gravity of the situation, thanked the doctor silently and left the medical office in a state of shock. In the following days, he was admitted to the hospital to begin treatment, an exhausting routine of chemotherapy and other procedures that left him increasingly debilitated. Clara, though shaken, tried to maintain a facade of optimism, sitting beside Edward's hospital bed, holding his hand while he rested. "It's going to be okay, love. You are strong. We'll get through this together." However, despite her words of encouragement, Edward's condition deteriorated rapidly. His body was not responding to the treatments as expected, and with each passing day he felt weaker, struggling to keep hope alive. "I'm trying to be strong, Clara, but it's so hard," Edward confessed in a moment of vulnerability, his weak voice barely able to express the turmoil of emotions he was feeling. Clara squeezed his hand, trying to offer some comfort, But the truth was that both felt the weight of the situation. The future, which once seemed full of possibilities, was now clouded by uncertainty and the fear of what lay ahead. Edward's condition worsened, and he was transferred to the ICU, a place of dim lights and the constant beeping of machines monitoring every aspect of his fragile health. After numerous treatment attempts, the doctors had to face the grim reality. There were no viable options left. They informed the family that Edward's state was critical and that they should prepare for the worst. One quiet afternoon, when the EQ was calm, Edward, against all expectations, awoke from a semi-conscious state. It was then that he heard familiar voices speaking softly outside the room. "Despite everything, I am grateful to have married Edward," Clara said, her voice laden with forced emotion. "He is a good man," and being by his side was advantageous. Mary, whose voice always had a commanding tone, replied, "Yes, I am also grateful. I remember when he was involved with that poor girl. It was fortunate that he chose you." Clara leaning closer, Clara whispered. "And that plan we devised with the actor to drive Beatrice away worked perfectly. After that, it was easy to get closer to Edward." Mary laughed softly. "Ah yes, that pregnancy story. When Beatrice came to tell me she was pregnant, I simply threatened her. She had no choice but to disappear." After hearing the shocking confession from his mother and wife, Edward found himself in a whirlwind of emotions. The revelation that his love life had been cruelly manipulated cut deeper than any disease could. Although the weakness of his body kept him confined to the bed, his mind was acutely awake, processing every word Mary and Clara had said. With Herculean effort, Edward managed to keep his breathing steady and his eyes closed, simulating unconsciousness. He knew that any change in his expression or breathing could reveal his awakening, and he needed time to think and plan his next move without Mary or Clara noticing. As he pretended to still be in a coma, he heard the soft steps of Mary and Clara moving away, continuing their conversation as if nothing had happened. Edward remained still, each heartbeat seeming to echo in the silent room. He felt a mix of deep sadness and growing anger for being deceived by people who were supposed to protect him. "How could they do this to me, to Beatrice, to our child?" he murmured internally. Edward knew he needed to act. But first, he had to maintain the pretense of his condition, to buy time and devise a plan to expose the truth and somehow seek justice for Beatrice and his unknown child. Each second spent with his eyes closed, pretending to be unconscious, was a second he used to strengthen his resolve. He knew the road ahead would be arduous and painful, but he was determined to face the truth and seek reparation for the damage caused. Unfortunately, after a few days of struggle, Edward passed away peacefully one night, without having the chance to reconcile with Beatrice and meet his son. Edward's wake was marked by a somber and mournful atmosphere held at the Grand Wallace family house. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered, bringing flowers and sharing memories while mourning his premature departure. Mary and Clara, dressed in black and with expressions of grief, received condolences from the visitors, their faces marked by a sadness that only they knew was superficial. "He was such a good and generous man, a true leader for all of us," said one of Edward's colleagues, while others nodded and shared their own memories of their interactions with him. Days after Edward's wake, the atmosphere in the large living room of the Wallace mansion was tense and expectant. Family members had gathered for the reading of Edward's will, a moment many hoped would clarify the future of Edward's vast properties and business interests. As Edward's lawyer prepared the documents, the door to the room opened silently, and Beatrice entered, holding the hand of a small boy, Franklin. Their presence caused an immediate murmur among those present, with looks of surprise and confusion crossing the room. Mary and Clara turned abruptly, their faces expressing shock and displeasure. "What is she doing here?" Clara whispered to Mary, who just shook her head, equally perplexed. Beatrice, feeling the eyes on her, spoke with a firm voice, although internally she was filled with conflicting emotions. "I was summoned to be here today by Edward's lawyer," she began, squeezing Franklin's hand. "I was shocked to hear of Edward's death, and I'm still trying to understand it all. It is very important for me and my son to be here today." The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a solemn expression, confirmed Beatrice's words. "Yes, it is true. Beatrice and her son Franklin are explicitly mentioned in Edward's will. It is crucial that they are present." The lawyer's words increased the tension in the room, and murmurs and exchanged glances continued as Beatrice and Franklin took a seat quietly in a corner, waiting for the lawyer to proceed with the reading of the will. Mary and Clara, containing their frustration and surprise, cast furtive glances in Beatrice's direction, trying to disguise their anxiety about what the will's words might reveal. When Edward's lawyer announced that he would begin the reading of the will with the showing of a video, a murmur of confusion and expectation rippled through the room. Everyone adjusted in their seats as the lawyer prepared the projector. The lights dimmed, and the screen lit up with the image of Edward, visibly debilitated, lying in a hospital bed. In the video, Edward's voice was weak but filled with emotion. "If you are watching this," he began, "it is because I have already passed away. In my final days, I received news that profoundly shaped my understanding of life and the people around me." Edward paused, taking a breath before continuing. The worst news was discovering that the two people I trusted most, my mother and my wife, conspired against me to end my relationship with Beatrice, the woman I truly loved. This betrayal was one of the greatest disappointments of my life. A collective gasp was heard in the room, with shocked looks turning towards Mary and Clara, who seemed petrified. Edward then changed his tone, his voice softening as a sad smile appeared on his face. But I also received the best news possible. I found out that I am the father of a wonderful boy, Franklin. It is a great sorrow not to be able to meet you, my son, but I want you to know that I will do everything in my power to ensure you have a good life. The video then focused on Edward, looking directly at the camera, as if he could see Franklin at that moment. Franklin, this is my legacy to you. I leave all my inheritance to you, with your mother, Beatrice, as the guardian of the estate. I hope this can provide everything you deserve. Edward now addressed Beatrice directly, saying, Beatrice, I am sorry for not believing in you. I hope that with time you can forgive me. May this gesture help take care of our son and offer you both the life I would have liked to build by your side. When the video ended, the silence was palpable. Mary and Clara seemed to be in a state of shock, unable to speak or move, while Beatrice, with tears in her eyes, held Franklin's hand, offering him a smile through her tears, filled with conflicting emotions: sadness for the loss of Edward, relief for the justice of his last wishes, and hope for her son's future. Edward's revelation shocked everyone present and drastically altered the dynamics among those gathered. The murmurs were of disbelief and compassion as everyone absorbed Edward's final words. Deeply moved, Beatrice wiped away the tears streaming down her face, holding Franklin's hand tighter. The weight of Edward's words resonated in her heart, bringing a mix of pain for his loss and relief for the recognition and care he showed in his last wishes. Then Mary, unable to contain her consternation and despair at seeing her son's legacy handed over to Beatrice and Franklin, stood up abruptly. Her voice, laden with frustration and defiance, cut through the murmur in the room. This is absurd. How can we know if Edward was really Franklin's father? He wasn't even sure. The lawyer, maintaining his professional composure amid the emotional chaos, responded calmly. Edward anticipated this doubt, and in his will, he specified that a DNA test should be conducted to confirm Franklin's paternity. He wanted to ensure that there would be no questioning of his final wishes. The lawyer's announcement only intensified the emotional whirlwind in the room. Clara, who had remained in a state of silent shock beside Mary, now looked at Beatrice with a new perspective as the pieces began to fall into place. Beatrice, still recovering from the emotional roller coaster, simply nodded in agreement with the proposal for the DNA test, confident in the truth and ready to prove Franklin's paternity so that they could finally claim the legacy Edward had left them. The atmosphere was tense as everyone awaited the DNA test results. Beatrice, although confident in the truth, couldn't help but feel palpable anxiety, knowing Franklin's future was at stake. Mary and Clara, on the other hand, held a nervous hope that the test might somehow invalidate Edward's last wishes. When the day of the DNA test results revelation finally arrived, Edward's lawyer called everyone back to the same room where the will had been read. Holding a sealed envelope, he broke the seal and read the contents aloud. The DNA test results unequivocally confirm that Franklin is the biological son of Edward Wallace. The confirmation of paternity caused a wave of distinct emotions in the room. Beatrice, relieved and emotional, hugged Franklin, whispering words of love and promises of a better future. Mary and Clara, however, were visibly shaken, realizing that their last hopes of contesting the will had vanished. Faced with the irrefutable truth, the lawyer continued, as per Edward's instructions, all of his inheritance, including the mansion, the cars, and the control of his company, will be transferred to Franklin, with Beatrice as his legal guardian until he reaches adulthood. For Mary and Clara, Edward had left only a modest house in a suburb, a fraction of what they had expected to inherit. This was Edward's wish, the lawyer explained. He expressed in the video that he wanted to ensure that Franklin and Beatrice had the means for a dignified and happy life, free from the influences he considered toxic. Mary and Clara, facing the reality of having lost almost everything, left the room with sorrow and resignation, their somber expressions contrasting with the hope on the faces of Beatrice and Franklin. The implications of Edward's decision not only redistributed his fortune but also redefined family dynamics, making it clear that his last will was to protect and provide for his son and the woman he truly loved. With the inheritance secured and the legal challenges overcome, Beatrice took over the management of Edward's company. Although initially intimidated by the magnitude of her new responsibility, Beatrice quickly adapted, applying the same dedication and intelligence that had always characterized her. Under her leadership, the company thrived, generating significant revenue that ensured a comfortable future for her and Franklin. As Beatrice navigated the business world, she remained equally committed at home, focusing on raising Franklin with the values she considered essential. Every night after a family dinner, Beatrix made sure to spend quality time with Franklin, whether reading to him, helping with homework, or simply talking about his day. You see, Franklin Beatrix often said during these quiet moments, money and success bring many opportunities, but the most important thing is how we choose to use those opportunities. We must always remember where we came from and help those in need. Franklin, growing up hearing these conversations, absorbed every word. He admired his mother not only for her ability to run a company, but also for her compassion and ethics. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to help people just like you do," he proudly declared, his eyes shining with the innocence and seriousness of a child who wants to make a difference. Beatrix smiled, knowing she was on the right path. "That makes me very proud, Franklin. Whenever you need guidance, I'll be here for you." Over time, their home was filled with luxury, but more importantly, it was filled with love, laughter, and many life lessons. Beatrix had managed to create a balance between being a successful executive and a devoted mother, teaching Franklin the value of humility and gratitude in the face of life's blessings and challenges. Despite her new life as a successful executive and single mother, Beatrix never abandoned the dream of completing her education. With the financial stability secured by Edward's inheritance and the continued success of the company, she felt it was the right time to resume her interrupted journey in law school. One afternoon, while Franklin played in the garden, Beatrix sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began researching law programs. She was determined to find a course that fit her already busy schedule, perhaps even a night or online program that would allow her to balance her professional and family responsibilities. "You know, Franklin," Beatrix explained during a conversation that evening while they prepared dinner together in the kitchen, "I'm going back to college to finish my law degree. I've always wanted to be a lawyer, and now I can do it." Franklin, stirring the salad, looked at her with admiration. "That's amazing, Mom. You always tell me to follow my dreams. Now it's your turn, right?" Beatrix smiled, touched by her son's understanding. "Exactly, my dear. And with you supporting me, I know I can do anything." She enrolled for the next semester, diving back into her studies with renewed passion. Her classmates and professors quickly noticed her dedication and life experience, which enriched classroom discussions. Beatrix skillfully balanced her responsibilities as a mother and CEO during the day and transformed into a student at night, often seen reading cases and preparing arguments after Franklin fell asleep. This new chapter, besides fulfilling Beatrix's long-held dream, also served as a powerful example to Franklin about the importance of education and perseverance. Together, they celebrated every small victory on Beatrix's path to graduation, reinforcing the bonds of love and respect that defined their relationship. As Beatrix progressed in her studies and successfully managed Edward's company, she found a new form of connection and gratitude that transcended the complications of the past. Periodically, she visited the cemetery where Edward was buried, a practice that became a solemn and reflective ritual for her. One quiet afternoon, with the sky clear and the sun filtering through the leaves of the cemetery trees, Beatrix walked slowly to Edward's grave, carrying a small bouquet of white flowers. Franklin, now a bit older and always understanding, sometimes accompanied her, but that day she was alone. Reaching the grave, Beatrix arranged the flowers and sat on the soft grass next to the headstone. "Hi, Edward," she began, her voice gentle, carrying a mix of melancholy and gratitude. "I just wanted to come here to thank you. So much of what we have now, so much of what we are able to do, is because of you." She paused, looking at the name engraved on the stone, allowing her emotions to flow freely. "Franklin is growing so fast, and he is amazing. You would be proud of him. He reminds me of you in many ways." Beatrix sighed, feeling Edward's presence in the passing breeze, as if he were listening. "I wish you could see all this. I wish you were here to share these moments, but somehow I feel that you are with us, guiding us. Thank you, Edward, for everything." Beatrix then continued, her voice clear and firm, resonating with the quiet strength she had cultivated over the years. "I forgive you. I truly forgive you for everything we went through. So much pain and challenges, and here I am." She paused, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with vibrant colors. "I am very happy, Edward. I graduated. I finished college, and the company is doing incredibly well. We have big plans, and everything is falling into place. You always wanted this for us, and I am making it a reality." Beatrix smiled, a smile that reflected both joy and the serenity she had achieved. "Thank you for everything you gave us. I carry your legacy with pride, and Franklin is a daily reminder of the love we shared and of the future you dreamed for him." With these words, Beatrix took a step back, feeling whole, as if a cycle had closed perfectly. With a light heart and a clear vision for the future, she turned and walked back to her car, ready to continue the life they had dreamed together, a life that was now hers and Franklin's to shape.